Okay, everyone, we are back. We're going to get right into our grievance response mechanism. All right, so grievance response and redress. So Mario touched a little bit on this as well, and he did state that a grievance response mechanism, which is mechanism, in other words, plan, is a requirement for the EMA and the EIA process as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about it in depth here and give you some examples of what that looks like. So the grievance response mechanism, and for short, we're going to refer to this as the GRM henceforth, is a formal and informal complaint process that there allows individuals and groups to raise concerns, or in this case, grievances, with the organization or implementing project related to any adverse impacts that are happening as a result of that project specifically. So what is the purpose? It is to address the complaints, right? To make sure that we have an open and ongoing communication with the beneficiaries involved, and even also stakeholders as well, right? So it's not just beneficiaries who can submit complaints. It can be a stakeholder who is maybe overseeing the process. It can also be persons from the project team themselves. So it can really, it's open to, I would say, almost the general public. And so it has to be a formal mechanism where people can voice these concerns about any environmental, social, gender-related impacts of the project, but it's not just limited to that. It can also be an infrastructural complaint. So let's say somebody's fence got broken down in the process of construction, that can be filed as a grievance, etc. Why is this important? Accountability. It ensures that we are, as the project teams, accountable for what we do and that we're making sure we're mitigating those negative impacts. Transparency as well. The communication is open. It is for anybody to be able to submit a complaint and be responded to. And if the complaint is deemed valid, then it will, be responded to and rectified from there. But we at least have that platform where they can reach out to us and bring whatever it is they need to bring to the table. And also in the long term, we're preventing conflict, right? Because it's an avenue where people can formally submit that and prevents us having escalating conflicts within the communities, right? And again, just ensuring that they feel like they have a mode of communication with us. Next slide. So in the SORB, residents within SORB region can easily report any concerns about our project and activities through the grievance system, which is facilitated through our implementing entity. And then we, within that process, therefore, there is a prompt resolution plan. And so typically, you can go to the next slide, Celeste, but I'll just expand. Typically, a grievance response mechanism has a timeline to it, right? So if you say that we've received a complaint today, it will typically say that the complaint should be responded to, acknowledged at least within 5 days, considered by an evaluation team within 10 days after that, have a solution developed within 10 days after that. And then, the solution should be implemented within X amount of days after that. That is just an example of a timeline. And all grievance response mechanisms need to have this timeline. You'll see that element here. It needs to be predictable because this is what ensures that it is facilitating the accountability that we promise, right? So for a GRM to be effective, it needs to be legitimate, right? It needs to exist so that people can see it. It needs to be publicized, right? So they need to know where to access it. And that might mean, well, the next thing is accessibility, right? So if you have, for example, an online platform where grievances can be submitted, depending on the community you're working with, not everybody might have access to that. So how else can you make it accessible? We're making sure that there might be a phone line available, that they might have access to, a community representative, a person in the community who they can physically go and speak to if that's necessary. And we facilitate them through that submission process. Like I said, it needs to be predictable, it needs to be time bound, and it needs to be laid out so that when a person submits a complaint, they themselves can see that response plan. And so they know what to expect, what is the next step in that process. And then lastly, of course, it needs to be equitable. So we need to ensure that everybody who's submitting a grievance has access to do so, and that they also are given that the process is fair and informed and respectful. And that means that the persons who are assessing the grievances are often third-party groups who are unbiased, objective, and able to look at things from an equitable perspective. Next slide. So the principles of this, how do we make sure that we're doing just checking something, see we have a comment in the chat. How do we make sure that we're doing things the way we're supposed to do? So we need to be transparent, and that we're informing parties to a grievance of its status, the status of their submission, and that we're building confidence in their trust in the process. It needs to be rights compatible, which means that we're ensuring that the outcomes, in other words, the solutions that we're providing, align with human rights standards, with the principles of the project itself, whatever it may be. It also needs to be a source of learning, right? So it's a chance for us to anything that's filed through a GRM should go into your monitoring and evaluation tools as well. So it becomes a chance for you to identify and apply lessons learned and adjust future activities to make sure that we prevent future grievances as the project continues. And then lastly, it's based on engagement and dialogue, seeking regular feedback on the design and performance of the mechanism itself, right? So those who are using it, you're making sure it's working for them. We're making sure that people are easily finding it. All of that should be included in our M&E processes as well. Next slide. So how do we build a GRM? First, we have to identify our key actors in the communities, the companies, whoever we are serving. We need to understand the environment. And then we define the scope of what grievances we might receive, right? So if we're doing an infrastructural project, we know that the grievances we receive might not just be infrastructural damage, but it might also mean that the intended benefits aren't what they're supposed to be, that there might be noise and dust pollution we need to consider, and that would be included in our ESMP as well. But we're thinking about the types of grievances that we might receive and how we can plan for those. And then we're determining the purpose and goals of the mechanism itself, how we intend to respond, what we intend to do in response, and therefore what the ultimate purpose is of our GRM. Next slide. Are we done? There we are. Okay. So then lastly, we're thinking about monitoring and evaluation for our GRM, and this is the most essential part. So we're ensuring that our grievances are addressed and resolved effectively in a timely manner, most importantly, and that we are continuously improving as a result of the grievances that we receive. Identifying trends in the grievances is critical for us improving our response process as well, right? Are we receiving multiple of the same grievance over and over? Therefore, how can we adjust our project? And how can we adjust our grievance response process in as well to make sure that we're making it easier for people to speak with us? And we're tracking the issues, like I said, recurring issues, and then trying to address those problems as early as possible. And the key M&E elements for this are tracking the volume, recording all complaints received and resolved, right? So even if a complaint is received and maybe is not deemed as valid within the project scope, people can submit a complaint thinking that what they've experienced is a result of the project when it might be the result of something that's external to the project. It doesn't mean that this complaint should be ignored. It still needs to be recorded. It still needs to be responded to so that there is that trust and transparency is maintained. We also need to continue to measure our response time, ensuring that the complaints we receive are addressed within the timelines we've promised, giving feedback as well, collecting stakeholder feedback on the grievance process, as mentioned before, and analyzing the trends. So for example, looking at our SORB project, if we receive multiple grievances from a particular community about infrastructure, then we need to reassess, right? We need to reassess our flood management strategy in that area. And this is informed as well by our M&E data. It might further be informed through consultations that are strategic to the grievance that has been filed. It would really depend on the context. And then additionally, it's important to remember that grievances can be submitted not just by an individual, but by a group of persons as well. So if there is a community that's affected, more often than not, you'll see a community come together and submit a grievance jointly because they've more than likely already had a discussion about it, more than likely have come to, some joint conclusions about what is going on and what their needs are. And so they will submit that as one. And it should be noted in your monitoring process as well. Even though it is one complaint coming in, maybe it represents a multitude of people, right? And so the weight of that complaint needs to be considered. Next slide. So we're wrapping up there, and we're going to just review some key takeaways essentially as we come out of the workshop. And then of course, any questions, if there's any questions now on the GRM process, you all can feel free to throw up your hand while I do this review, and then we'll get into our final Q&A. But the key takeaways are that our environmental and social safeguards are critical for reducing harm, ensuring equity, and strengthening our project impact. Our safeguarding tools like our ESAs, ESMPs, our GAPs, and our GESISAPs help manage environmental, social, and gender-related risks, and our grievance mechanisms provide transparent ways to address concerns and improve accountability. Last but not least, our monitoring and evaluation ensures that the safeguards we're implementing are working and supporting adaptive management. So when you're thinking about how you apply what you've hopefully learned today, um, how to use these ESS tools like ESMPs, GAPs, and GESISAPs in your day-to-day planning and decision-making, identify and address environmental and social risks early in your projects, and overall ensure inclusive participation, especially for those groups who are identified as vulnerable at the early stages. Next slide.